The moment still feels familiar. You're halfway through a sentence when something stops you cold. A word hangs in the air, unsaid. Mom's eyes lift from her plate. Dad clears his throat. The room goes quiet. In that pause, you know you've crossed an invisible line. In Britain, growing up wasn't only about behavior. It was about language. Certain words simply weren't for children, and everyone knew it. No rule book, no explanation. Just looks, silence, and consequences. Today, children speak freely, question everything, and rarely hold their tongue. Back then, a single word could change the atmosphere instantly forever then. Most people forget how much language shaped behavior back then. Post-war Britain was a country finding its feet again, and that sense of careful rebuilding reached right into the home. Houses were smaller, walls were thinner, and voices tended to stay low. Children were expected to listen more than they spoke, and when they did speak, their words mattered. Respect wasn't just shown through actions, but through tone, phrasing, and knowing exactly when to stay quiet. Parents rarely sat children down to explain these rules. They didn't need to. A raised eyebrow, a pause in conversation, or a sudden silence did the teaching instead. Words were corrected swiftly, often without discussion, because good manners were seen as a reflection of family, upbringing, and place in society. At school, the same expectations followed. Certain phrases were encouraged, others quietly discouraged, and children learned fast. Today, language is something we talk about openly. Feelings are named, questions are welcomed, explanations are offered. But back then, words were lessons in discipline, belonging, and respect, shaping behavior long before children understood why, and setting the stage for everything that followed. It was a quiet education that left marks many still recognize today clearly now. There were things you simply didn't say, and every child knew it without being told. Talking back was top of the list. A question that sounded too sharp, a reply delivered a second too late, or a tone that hinted at challenge could stop a room dead. Adults expected agreement, not debate, and children learned quickly how dangerous curiosity could sound. Then there were adult topics, the mysterious conversations that happened after children were sent to play, or when voices dropped suddenly at the table. If you asked what they were talking about, you were met with a gentle but firm reminder that some things were not for your ears. You didn't push it. You learned that growing up meant waiting. Boasting was another quiet offense. Pride, especially spoken aloud, was frowned upon. You didn't talk about how well you'd done or what you'd received. Gratitude was expected, and complaining was treated the same way. If you grumbled about food, weather, or boredom, you were quickly reminded how fortunate you were. Many learned to swallow words before they escaped. Public places came with their own rules. In shops, on buses, or standing in a queue, children were expected to blend into the background. Loud remarks or awkward questions earned that look, the one that needed no explanation. Kitchens, classrooms, and Sunday visits to relatives all followed the same code. You watched, listened, and learned when silence was safer. Those unspoken rules shaped how a generation spoke long before anyone thought to ask why. And by the time childhood gave way to adolescence, these careful habits traveled beyond the front door, into school corridors and playgrounds, where different voices held authority, but the same caution followed you everywhere. Ready to be tested again, as lessons deepened with time passing slowly onward. Some of these rules were never written down, but everyone knew them. School brought its own language lessons, delivered through routine and repetition. Mornings began with straight lines, quiet halls, and voices kept firmly under control. A raised hand mattered more than enthusiasm, and speaking out of turn was noticed instantly. Teachers didn't need to raise their voices often. Expectation did the work for them. In the playground, a different code applied. Words could win allies or invite trouble, and children learned fast how to read the room. You knew when to speak up, when to joke, and when to say nothing at all. Certain remarks earned laughter, others a sharp reminder that someone bigger, older, or louder was listening. Praise came quietly, often through a nod or a simple "well done." Trouble arrived just as quietly, in the form of a pause, a look, or a name written down. The lesson was always the same. Choose your words carefully. Today's classrooms sound different. Discussion is encouraged, opinions are shared, and silence is rarely the goal. But back then, knowing when to be quiet was as important as knowing the right answer, and those schoolyard lessons followed people into adulthood. It wasn't always easy, but it was ours. Those silences, so heavy at the time, shaped more than our speech. They shaped confidence built on restraint, the ability to read a room, and humor that relied on understatement rather than noise. Many learned how to endure awkward moments without filling them, how to listen closely, and how to wait. Of course, some rules felt unfair. Curiosity was sometimes clipped, feelings left unspoken, questions unanswered. Yet within those limits grew a shared understanding. Everyone knew the boundaries, and that knowledge created a sense of belonging. You were part of something larger, following the same codes as your friends, neighbors, and cousins at Sunday gatherings. Today, silence is often seen as a problem to solve. Back then, it was a tool, a teacher, and occasionally a comfort. Looking back now, those quiet moments tell us who we were, and why memories remain. Would those words be allowed today? It's a question many of us quietly ask. Children now are encouraged to explain themselves, to share feelings, to speak up without fear of a sharp look across the table. The rules have changed, and with them, childhood has changed too. This isn't about better or worse, only different paths shaping different people. Those old silences gave us one kind of strength. Today's openness gives another. So which words stopped you short back then? And do they still echo when you hear them now?